From Twitter to X, Elon's free speech experiment that reshaped the internet. Elon's X hits back-to-back records, while ads and law tighten the boundary. X didn't rebound by becoming universally liked. It rebounded by becoming the place the world checks first when something big happens. In the last 48 hours, Elon Musk has pointed to two record-level usage moments. On February 28, 2026, he wrote that X hit another all-time high yesterday, citing 417 billion user seconds globally and 93 billion in the US. He then echoed the claim on March 1, 2026, calling it the highest usage of X ever while responding to X's head of product, who described that day as the platform's biggest. That double-peak framing matters because it signals what Musk believes the turnaround is really about, not just rebuilding a company, but rebuilding an attention machine that wins the live moment. The central tension is simple. A platform can maximize speech and maximize advertiser comfort, but it rarely gets both at once. The story turns on whether X can keep record attention while turning it into stable revenue under tightening legal and trust constraints. Key points. Musk has framed X's recent surge as back-to-back record usage, including a February 28 post that cites 417 billion global user seconds and 93 billion US user seconds for a single day. X's rebound strategy paired extreme cost-cutting with a new incentive stack, paid tiers, creator monetization, and distribution mechanics that reward high-frequency posting and rapid engagement. X's free speech identity is also its biggest commercial trade-off because looser enforcement can amplify attention while increasing brand safety anxiety and regulatory scrutiny. Europe has already demonstrated it can enforce constraints through platform design and transparency rules, including a €120 million Digital Services Act fine announced on December 5, 2025. Advertising forecasts point to growth from post-acquisition lows, but growth from a low base is not the same as pricing power or long-term stability. The next test is whether X can reduce fraud, impersonation, and enforcement volatility without dulling the product's edge, the very edge that drives peak usage. Twitter was never just another social app. It was a status network for journalists, officials, founders, and activists. Its influence often exceeded its financial strength, which left it exposed to advertising cycles and reputation shocks. Musk bought Twitter in 2022, took it private, and later rebranded it as 10th. The first move was operational/costs, accelerate product decisions, and rebuild internal execution speed. The second move was cultural positioning. Musk pushed X toward a free speech posture, including reinstatements and a narrower view of what should be removed. This made X more attractive, more loyal to some, more hostile to others, and always in the argument. The third move was business model diversification. X pushed paid tiers and expanded creator monetization. Whether those lines become stabilizers at scale remains contested, but the intent is clear. Rely less on fragile ad sentiment and more on direct payments tied to engagement and creator output. The pressure test. Can free speech win without collapsing trust? The pro-X argument is philosophical and practical. A real public square is messy. If speech is filtered too tightly, the square becomes managed, predictable, and less useful for contesting power. The counter-argument is operational. Platforms do not moderate opinions in the abstract. They moderate harassment, doxing, scams, impersonation, and illegal content. They also manage coordinated manipulation and bots. If enforcement becomes inconsistent, users stop trusting what they see, advertisers stop trusting where their ads land, and regulators stop trusting the operator. This is the key boundary. The free speech posture can increase attention, but trust is the substrate that lets a system scale safely. Once trust erodes, pressure shifts from users to law, payments, and access. Competing models of X, public square, media outlet, or attention exchange. X is described as a public square, but it behaves like an attention exchange. In a public square model, the aim is civic utility, broad reach, legitimacy, and friction reduction for participation, even if the content is dull. In a media outlet model, the aim is editorial trust, consistent standards, clear accountability, and fewer surprises. In an attention exchange model, the aim is intensity, time, reactions, quote posts, and onward distribution. The currencies are not in agreement. It is attention. Musk's preferred usage metric, user seconds, is a tell. It treats the product's output as time spent at scale. That framing explains why X still dominates certain moments. During crises, elections, wars, and scandals, speed beats polish, and the feed becomes a live arena for power and narrative. The core constraint, revenue must outrun debt and brand safety exits. Record usage is not proof of a profitable turnaround. It is proof of pull. X still faces the hard constraint of funding, acquisition debt, infrastructure costs, and the need for cash flow that does not vanish during reputational storms. You can cut headcount quickly. You cannot cut interest by posting harder. Advertising remains the largest pool of money, but it is also the most sensitive to adjacency risk, the fear of being seen next to content a brand doesn't endorse. That creates a structural trade-off for a platform that markets itself as maximal speech. The platform can become more compelling to users at the same time it becomes harder to sell at premium prices to cautious advertisers. Forecasts in 2025 suggested X would return to year-over-year ad growth from post-acquisition lows, including estimates of roughly 2.2% $6 billion in global ad sales and 1.3% $1 billion in U.S. ad sales for 2025. That is meaningful, but it still sits far below Twitter's reported 2021 advertising peak. The pro-turnaround read is that the floor stopped falling out. The skeptical read is that the ceiling is lower than it used to be. The hinge lever, incentives that turn users into producers and police. Musk's most important shift wasn't only policy. It was incentives. Paid tiers, visibility features, and creator monetization push users to produce more content and in formats that hold attention. That increases supply and keeps the system alive, especially when the world is in breaking news mode. At the same time, Community Notes attempts to outsource a slice of credibility enforcement to the crowd. Peer-reviewed research has found that posts receiving a note tend to see reductions in engagement and diffusion afterward, though other analyses and critical reports argue the tool can be too slow or too inconsistent to keep pace with election-grade misinformation. Both views can be true. Crowd correction can work in aggregate while still failing in the fastest and most politicized moments. This is the hinge in practice. X is trying to scale speech by scaling participation, not only in posting, but also in correction. That is a bet on distributed legitimacy. The measurable signal, record usage is a spike. Cache stability is the proof. If you want to know whether peak usage is a durable turnaround or a news cycle spike, the test requires less attention. The test is stability. First, watch the monetization mix. If subscriptions and creator economics become a steady share of revenue, the platform becomes less hostage to ad mood swings. Product leadership has claimed subscription revenue has reached an annual run rate level that would be material at platform scale, but that claim is not the same as audited public reporting, and it should be treated as a directional signal rather than a settled fact. Second, watch pricing power. A platform is truly back when it can sell ads at consistent rates without constant discounting. Third, watch institutional constraint. Europe's Digital Services Act enforcement has already demonstrated a mechanism that does not depend on debating speech. On December 5, 2025, the European Commission announced a €120 million fine focused on transparency and design obligations, how verification is presented, how ads are logged, and whether researchers can access public data. That's a structural style of pressure, and it can force product and governance changes. What most coverage misses. The hinge is this: Musk's turnaround bet is that attention is the product, and incentive design can convert attention into mixed revenue faster than trust and legal constraints can hard cap the system. That changes incentives because it reframes conflict as fuel and real-time urgency as habit. It also explains the record usage language. It is a scoreboard for the attention engine, not a financial statement. Two signposts would confirm the hinge over the coming weeks and months. First, whether X can improve transparency and reduce impersonation and scam pressure without flattening engagement. Second, whether revenue becomes less news cycle dependent, meaning ad pricing and subscription income stays steady even when the world is quiet. What changes now? In the short term, X's advantage is momentum. When a crisis hits, it still concentrates elites, institutions, journalists, and spectators in one place, with minimal friction and maximum feedback. Over the longer term, the constraint is governance. A platform can claim free speech as a value, but it cannot claim exemption from the operational demands of scale, predictable enforcement, auditable systems, and compliance that is built into product architecture. The main consequence flows through one mechanism. If predictability rises, advertisers pay more because they fear surprises less. If predictability falls, revenue stays volatile, and the turnaround becomes a string of peaks rather than a stable slope. Decisions and events to watch include further DSA enforcement steps and any concrete product changes tied to verification, ad transparency, and researcher access, because those are levers regulators can pull without ever arguing about ideology. Real-world impact. A small business owner finds that one viral post can outperform weeks of paid marketing, but only if it hits the engagement current, and the current can change overnight. A journalist uses X as a real-time tip line in a fast-moving story, then spends extra hours verifying claims because openness increases noise, impersonation, and manipulation risks. A brand manager sees audience value on X, but prices in the screenshot are a risk because a single placement can turn into a reputational incident. A public official treats X as both a megaphone and a battlefield, because narrative advantage there can outrun slower channels, especially during emergencies. The fork in the road risk for X's next era. X has become an epicenter of free speech not because it is calm, but because it concentrates conflict where the world can see it. That is its edge and its vulnerability. The same intensity that drives record usage can also drive legal pressure, advertiser caution, and a permanent discount on trust. The fork in the road is whether X evolves into a more auditable, predictable attention exchange, or doubles down on maximum intensity and accepts narrower commercial compatibility. Watch the signposts, whether record usage converts into stable pricing power, whether transparency obligations are met without escalation, and whether X can reduce fraud while keeping the product fast. History may remember this period as the moment the public square stopped pretending it was polite and admitted what it really runs on: speed, attention, and contested power.